Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. At least once a quarter, I invite my friend Hillard Pouncy to join us here at 30 Minutes to talk about things that interest us and hopefully some of you. Hillard and I agree on practically nothing, but friendship and mutual respect trump any disagreements based on ideology or politics or social issues. I just enjoy visiting with Hillard. I love the way his mind works, and as I said, I have an enormously high regard for him, personally and professionally. Hillard is a social and political research scientist, author, and lecturer at Princeton University's Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. I finally got that straight. Much of his research focuses on the family unit in the Black community, especially in large urban settings. Hillard, as always, welcome to 30 Minutes. Delighted to have you here, and I appreciate your taking the time. As we normally do, we may start someplace but end up someplace else. So what is it you'd like to talk about today?
Well, thanks for asking me back, Rick. It's one of the measures I use for whether my life's been worth living.
I can't say it's by popular demand.
Well, don't do the people didn't ask. So the last time we were here, I think we were in the middle of the Ferguson, Missouri news cycle. Yes. And I'm not quite sure how that conversation went, but I remember it ended with this idea that the role of the social media in our world had certain moral implications, and the nut of it was always do good and be honest, because you never know who's watching. And almost as if we were prescient, we're back together. The news once again has a problem between a police officer and a minority individual, and whether you want to turn it into a community-based thing or not, that's for discussion.
Whatever it is, it's a tragedy.
And social media is involved, and the logic that we had, I think, agreed on comes to pass. Best to be honest, and at least in the initial examinations of the issue, it looks like the judgment of a police officer is been exposed, and it's not, he isn't using good judgment. And whether you want to go beyond that in some ways, that's another matter. But yeah, so why don't we get started on this new version of minority police relations.
I think the connection, if there is one, is that, as I said to you before we started rolling, I think Ferguson was truly a learning experience for the country, certainly for law enforcement in this country. For some of the thought leaders in the Black community. Our politics is changing because of it. Some of the themes that we will, I'm sure, see developing over the next year and a half or 2 years. So it was transformational. I think Ferguson was transformational. My hope is that it may be ugly, getting from where we were to where we should be, that there will continue to be lessons to be learned. There has to be some accommodation. There has to be some compromise. The pressure is on law enforcement in this country now. I wouldn't want to be a police officer on the streets of any city in this country right now because of the enormous pressure and the intimidation that they have to operate under. And under that kind of pressure, there are bound to be mistakes. There are bound to be bad behavior, if only because they are targets now, or there's a perception, there's a feeling that they are targets because of the animosity towards police in this country. And that is a generalization, and it certainly varies from city to city and region to region.
The conversation so far lasted less than 5 minutes.
Yes.
And we've already gotten to the usual spot where you're headed off at high speed in one way, and I'm not going there with you.
Okay. What part of it didn't you like?
Okay.
Which part didn't you like? Because I saw you shaking your head up and down. Doesn't that normally mean agreement?
So look, here's let's not do style points.
Okay.
Police. I think the quote was, "Police are targets now," and I wouldn't want to be a police officer.
No, I amended it. I said police feel that they are targets.
A friendly amendment.
And that's quite different.
Friendly amendment. Yes. No. And actually, I do want to. That is a useful point. I want to get to it. But initially, at least if we're talking about this North Charleston incident, the dead guy isn't the police officer,
yes,
right?
Right.
So
there's no question the police officer was in the wrong.
Yeah, right. So, we're now back on the same. Okay, but I do think this is an important point about how police feel.
Yes.
And in fact, I was on a panel just about 2 weeks ago. Fascinating panel. A DA from Brooklyn, a local police officer in Princeton. I think he's head of the campus police or had some role, but he was a good guy. He understood. He operated a diverse department, and he was on many panels figuring out how to police in diverse arenas. He knew all about community policing. The other guy had been in prison, gotten out of prison, and was and had made something out of himself. And he was coaching other ex-offenders how to write and stuff like that. And of course, I was there. And it was, the tone of the thing was narrow and focused and ain't it awful and what are we going to do? When the ex-offender really just, in effect, said, this is a throwback to Reconstruction and the violence of the Ku Klux Klan in modern garb, and he just wasn't having that there was any hope, unless the society somehow, in the aggregate sense, changed and all that. And it made me think a lot about this, because on the narrow side of it, it seems pretty straightforward, that if you can, that sure, we've got a social problem, and we can all agree that police can feel threatened or fearful. And there's a very good, well-designed intervention out in LA around very impacted neighborhoods and the city and the police department. And I think they've been able to reduce violence, at least in the public housing areas, by 70%. LA introduced the idea of major, almost industrial scale gangs. They've been able to make big inroads into that, and they've figured out how to solve issues. And the head of that thing is a woman named Connie Rice. She's the cousin of former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Right. Very, very smart woman. And she, the first thing she'll say in public arenas is, police are scared of black males. She doesn't even try to sugarcoat it. Police are fearful. She just goes right there. And then she elaborates, and it could be police officers who are members of a black church, white or black, police officers who have adopted black children, white or black. She buys into this idea that a policeman who's usually bulky, protected, with armor and empowered with a taser and a gun, all kinds of stuff, could be fearful of a person who has no weapons at all, to the point of using deadly force. And she buys that argument. She says, this is real, this can happen. And the real question is, then what do you do about it? And she said, if we accept that that's a reality, that can happen, then you can start to do something about it. And what she's been able to do in LA is she's trained the police to see themselves not in the arrest business, but in the community, I forgot their jargon.
Security?
Community assist business. Yeah, safety business. Safety, public safety, something like that, And she's been able, on the community side, to build a partner for productive purpose. Yeah. And it's worked. And now it's cost them over $1 billion, I guess, really? Over a 10-year period. Yeah. Because they don't just get people to sit down and have nice conversations. Right. You've got to show real stuff. You've got to show consequence, jobs, education, public safety.
So it's an investment in the community.
It's a huge investment that's paid off.
Including training?
Yeah,
of the police.
Yeah. But the training isn't simply, you probably shouldn't shoot a guy who's running away from you. Yeah. I don't think that one's going to be a good idea. You can, unless he's got a bomb.
What kind of training?
Well, the serious nature of the training, as I just said, was you produce spaces where police and their community partners figure this thing out. Okay. We're here to be of service, and the community people are saying we're here to be able to bring concerns to you without things boiling up.
Isn't that philosophically the basis for community policing, the new initiative that came out of the study?
Sure, several studies, and it's got several versions
the big
of
one that Commissioner Ramsey was, I think, co-chairman of. The 3-month study following Ferguson.
Well, the way I heard it is that there was and I wish I were better at names, but there's a researcher at NYU, I'm pretty sure, or CUNY, one of the a New York-based researcher, who actually started doing his work in Latin America, who is certainly identified with the coinage community policing, and depending on back in the 90s, and depending on how you identify it, it can be very narrowly defined or very broadly defined. But
Right.
but sure, it's got many fans, many versions, and it seems to be a successful intervention. And so, for example, in addition to the training of getting policemen to not see themselves as in the arrest business and you know, external to a community, another question comes out of it: does it help or hurt to wear these body cameras? My understanding is it seems to be a good idea, and a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, even had a follow-on thought that, you know, there are these software options that let you read body language of someone.
Yes.
So
You
at the
can read
extreme,
emotions.
yeah. So at the extreme, if the camera is showing a person running away from you, and you're wearing the this body camera, and you have earphones, in real time, the computer could say to a human being,
Yes.
this person is not a threat, and maybe you wouldn't.
I read or heard that,
Right,
yes,
right.
before.
And we're laughing, but this is
It
actually
sounds like
tragic.
to the extreme, but
Yeah.
I guess they could
You know,
push
you
it to
wouldn't
that.
think you'd have to get a fancy piece
you
of
would
equipment to
think.
tell a guy,
You
don't
would
shoot
think.
the guy if he's running away from you.
You know, there's I don't disagree with anything you said. I buy it
Well,
all.
this
I
has been a
support it.
tragic,
No,
tragic meeting.
But as we both know, behavior modification takes time and a lot of effort, and there have to be some incentives. There has to be some reward. That's one. Two, what we're asking the police, as well as other members in the community, blacks, whites, anybody, is to begin to take some of this on faith. It makes good sense, it's logical, it's in the public interest, it's in our mutual best interest to see if we can establish a rapport and identify people who can be liaisons between and among all of the forces to deal with issues that will be aberrations, that'll be out of the norm, that might have the potential of sparking something that's tragic. The police, though, have to be wrong once. That is, a trusting officer who, in spite of all the training, all of the understanding, all of the new relationships and so on, comes up against that one wacko who happens to be black or red or gray, whatever the color. But it's that one wacko who represents a real and serious threat, and as a result, the officer is injured or killed. And that throws all of that out the window because of that one exception to everything that everybody's trying to do, and to hold it, to sustain it long enough for it to become the way we do business here. It's the way we operate. It's the way we relate to one another. You understand what I'm saying?
Actually, I do. And I actually have a couple of thoughts about it. And my thought goes a bit like this. You know, in times of war...
I guess what I'm asking, forgive me, I guess the question behind that is, are the odds stacked against our solving this problem?
Okay, I actually understand you. I mean, it's. I know you want to.
I want the date and time.
I know it just you want to seem so out there, but some of us actually see it coming. So look, I'm going to go with two things on this one. One is that during World War II, if you had an option of surrendering, and it was between the Germans, the Russians, and the Americans, most people wanted to surrender Americans, because at least in the aggregate, our side had the reputation for being less barbaric than the others.
Yes.
And that, who knows how many lives that cost? American soldiers who
Yes.
weren't shoot-first types. But what we gained from that as a society is almost immeasurable. And if that's the price we paid to be in the position
I guess
we
your
are,
point.
yeah,
And I agree with it. It's a valid point.
Right. And the second version of that is that, again, there are things you can do, I think, to bring down the odds of risk. For example, this idea of a patrol assistance that lets the policeman be the point of a spear, and behind him are either software or central authorities who are able to look and see what he sees and think it through. Like, is this one a problem for us? Then you're never going to take the risk out of the profession. But I think you can. I think you can reduce the risk, and there's a reason police funerals are the way they are. There are reasons these guys are called heroes and all that, and that's their job. That's what they do. They do take risks.
What's the responsibility of, in the context of this conversation, what's the responsibility of the black community to reach the kind of reasonableness and rapport, establish a different rapport with law enforcement? The people who, to your earlier point, the people who exist, who are paid, who are responsible for and should be held accountable for maintaining safety, a safe environment for everybody in the community. What's the responsibility of the black community?
Well, I don't stand by you when you just limit it to the black community. I think it's a community.
What is the responsibility of the people who are served by law enforcement?
Yeah, to use the California,
particularly the black community.
To use the example of the California case,
right.
The community was proactive in saying, look, we want to be a partner in making our community. It helps our community if we have the ability to make people safe.
Yes.
We want police here. We want good police here. We don't want people afraid of the police. So a functional community, as opposed to a black community or anything, is a community in which the police are valued, they are given information to do their job, they are supported.
Are they also given the benefit of the doubt in those instances where somebody might do something untoward?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's
until at least the facts are presented.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's just that. So here's the deal. I read the report. It was called the COPS. It's an agency of cops. Get it? Center. I forgot. I don't remember but it was part of the Department of Justice. They did a report on the Philadelphia Police Department.
Wasn't it the International Association of Chiefs of Police?
Well, the one I read was by COPS because my mind works that way. I didn't read the Ferguson report. I've been reading characterizations of it, but based on the characterizations of the Ferguson report and the Philadelphia report, I will say this: in both cases, these were reports written without jargon, and they were almost like a pick your favorite newspaper account that said, something not good is happening here in the case of Ferguson, and something more good than not is happening here in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. I mean, the Inquirer tended to pick up on, I think they said something like 9% of arrests seem to be without merit or something like that, but that's a much smaller number than you would have expected. Most shootings are same race, even when it's police civilian. So I'm not quite sure what the point of this part of our conversation is, but can you what was your question?
My question broadly was, what's the responsibility of the community to those who serve them?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the point of these articles had been that in one case, in almost clear fashion, a community had become corrupted.
Right.
You weren't. But in Philadelphia's case, the community seemed to be well served by the police department, in part because the community had begun to recognize that it needed a good police department. I mean, it's straightforward as that.
Radnor, and it's not unique, but Radnor has adopted a program that has been used in other communities in this region and across the country. And I've forgotten the exact name. We had one of the policemen here as a guest, but it is citizen policing or something like that, where there's a citizen group. And
oh, really? Like neighborhood watch things?
no, well, it includes that, but there's
Okay.
a citizen group. But this group of citizens goes through a series of classes, instruction on the part presented by police on what policing is all about, public safety, security, and so on. And then they ride with police to experience what it's like to be possibly in threatening positions and how police are supposed to react.
That's interesting. Okay, so they're trying to get empathy built between the police
Empathy,
and the,
understanding, and to build, again, this liaison with the community so that when there is a need for extraordinary communication, the channels exist for extraordinary communication. It's a model that seems to be working. It's been proven in other situations.
I wonder where they got that idea from.
And it came out of, as I understand it, a community policing study and report that was done back in the 1990s.
Right.
I read that report. I think we're agreeing that this thing may be generational, regrettably.
Right.
It may take at least another generation because the youngsters in the black community now have been conditioned to believe that the police are against them.
Okay, no.
And that's being reinforced in the news media, which gets to another issue. What's the responsibility of the news media?
Right. Okay, so
because they feed this.
Right. So here's my dilemma.
All right.
I call it Hillard's dilemma.
Hillard's dilemma.
The dilemma is that as long as we're talking about places like Ferguson and North Charleston, South Carolina, in a certain way, you know, how do you stop, how do you get better decision making, how do you get better training, how do you get better police community relations? That's to me a manageable conversation. And it seems to me I can easily think of solutions and best practices and models, et cetera. But after you get off of that narrow pathway, you get into turf that at least I don't control very well. And we talked about this a little earlier, Rick. We were saying, is this new stuff or is this part of a pattern? If so, does it go back to the 60s? Does it go back further than that? What's the big picture? And I got to tell you, for the life of me, I haven't been able to get my mind around it. It seems to me there are a series of great questions. I personally don't have answers that make me happy, that satisfy me, but I do think they're there. And I'll put it to you like this. I don't think this is I don't agree with you. I think that this is generational. I think there's something going on. I know that the candidates for what's going on might include something like in a greater inequality and what a friend of mine calls the paradox of social integration, or the success of the civil rights movement, something like that. Are you actually following any of this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well,
I
because those two things shouldn't be going together.
But I'm able to do two things at once. I'm able to listen and think at the same time. I've been trained to do that. What's going through my mind is, and I think you're going to agree with this, is that, one, there are a number of variables. And whatever we're dealing with now, and we'll probably have to continue to deal with, is symptomatic of some things that go way back over a long period of time. Very complicated, very complex, not handled very well at a national level, at a public policy level, at a local level. But the one thing that sticks out for me, something I read quite recently, was consider the chronic poor, black or white, forget about color, but consider the chronic poor who have been intentionally or otherwise oppressed and suppressed for generations, have had no reason to aspire to anything more than they are experiencing now, have no reason to be hopeful that they'll have an opportunity to pull themselves up, to experience whatever the American dream is. All of that, and all of that pent-up frustration. So something like Ferguson happens, and I'm not talking about Al Sharpton and what he's able to incite, I'm talking about otherwise good people who are just
I happen to be a fan
angry.
of Al Sharpton, by the way. So
we'll talk about that.
We'll go another
who
day
are just
on that one.
plain angry, and somebody lights a fuse and they blow up. They're not even sure what they're mad at, except now they have reason to be mad. And in my opinion, the news media legitimizes it by reinforcing all of the bad stuff, all of the reasons that they have felt disadvantaged. And so they use the opportunity to make their voices heard. I think it's as simple, well, I was going to say as simple as that. That's not simple at all.
Okay, I'm going to go another way.
Do you agree with anything
No,
I've said up
not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
God, I thought I finally...
No.
Breached.
But that's our thing. I mean,
Oh, okay.
you can't have a... okay. But we've been thinking about the same thing, and it's... And so now I'll take a go at it. So it strikes me, Rick, that certainly if you look at, say, the 60s, urban unrest, riots, et cetera, and I think that might fit a model of desperation and feelings of inefficacy and no upward mobility, so you explode. But at the time of those riots, right, the civil rights movement hadn't taken root. It had just begun. It had had its initial successes, which is why people were so frustrated that you'd gotten the Civil Rights Act passed, Voting Rights Act passed. Johnson, you know, leveraged his political career on this stuff, and then the consequence is social unrest, great social violence, and some folks said, "Well, you see, I told you." So that's one design for social violence. But what's going on today is I would argue it's different in this way. There's huge evidence that we've had the consequences of the Civil Rights Movement and Voting Rights Movement Act are huge. I'm here today, people like my father benefited, okay, the cliche, there's a black president. You can't throw that away. And so there is a black middle class, there is evidence that our country has delivered yet again on its promise to its people, that if you work hard, this country will work for you.
But a very low percentage of 13% of this population.
Of which population?
The black population.
No. This is let's get this one right, because this is my thing.
Okay, well, you've got 2 minutes to do it.
Starting in the mid-1950s, the thing that happened to African Americans is the promise of this country, if you really want to speak about it. The promise of this country is that no matter who you are, where you come from, how things work for you, a third of you will become middle class. The question is, how long will it take? Because once a third of your ethnic group is middle class, you have a class or group that can now start to function in the system, operate politics, operate businesses, et cetera. In the 1950s, a third of black America became middle class. And right on schedule, within two generations.
In the 1950s, a third?
There you go, big boy. And so right on schedule, everything that theory predicts has happened. A greater mobility politically, socially, black presence routinely in theater, all of that stuff. The anomaly is that you still have the kinds of things that can be summarized by Ferguson in North Charleston, which is, enough of the black community still under stress, still in distress, so that they're available to these incidents with the police. Now that's the part that's interesting. Why is that happening? And the short answer is, well, in general as a system, we are moving towards greater inequality, and there's just a racial playing to that.
Inequality, did you say?
And nationally, our rates of inequality are ballooning, and so that seems to be a factor. How it all works out, that'll be for another one of your shows.
It'll have to be, and I'm frustrated because I don't have time to rebut.
Well, that's my plan, and it's after long study, I finally figured it out.
As always, Fred, good to have you here, and I look forward to the next joust. I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.